Bonjour, hi, and welcome back to another episode of Matthew's Always Wrong, the show where we are Canada One. We're starting a movement. Spoke about this a little bit last episode. Canada One, the movement where it's finally time that Canadians, they wake up a little bit, okay? Canada's being invaded by every front possible. Culturally, environmentally, because apparently, that's what we're going to get into today, the environmental genocide of Canada. But, we're being invaded, and it's high time Canadians start taking pride, start becoming a little bit more patriotic, a little bit more nationalistic in terms of their approach of Canada. So, today I want to wish everybody a little late happy Earth Day, as they like to call it. I want to get into climate change. Ooh. The biggest thing about climate change is that you cannot go against it. I think everybody knows this. This is the cornerstone. It's the main pillar holding up the liberal, leftist, democratic movement. Climate change underscores nearly every piece of legislative policy. It underscores nearly everything that the government does, at least left-wing government, and is one of the biggest reasons for critique of the right-wing governments. It is the strongest, I believe, the strongest hold that they have not only on voters, young people, and especially the scientific community. Because if you're able to create an environment, where you say anything skeptical, you ask a single question, the entire scientific community will rally against you. Science used to be about facts. It used to be about, doing research, asking questions. But now, if you try and bring up anything against this one narrative, you will be put down. Greta Thunberg's going to come in your house. She's going to peg you to death. That's what's going to happen, and that's what the globalists want. The globalists are able to use climate change as the basis for expanding their reach, expanding this global homogenous empire that will ultimately lead to the downfall of Canada. When you got all these people going to Davos, the W Economic Forum, and, the United Nations, the climate whatever, COP26 or whatever, all these people, first of all these leaders, they go there in their private jets. They're using thousands and thousands of private jets to go to these climate conferences and then scream about how poor people, they're using too much, they're committing too much CO2 emissions, right? All these, they're riding around, you got Joe Biden, you got Trudeau, all they talk about is climate change, right? And yet their motorcades are 50 cars long, right? So it's these people, they go to these climate events in Switzerland or whatever, and then they talk about it, they go, oil's bad, right? We're causing too much pollution, there's not enough recycling, right? We need more wind, we need more solar. Fossil fuels are the worst, right? That's what they say. But here's the thing, right? Not only are these people massively hypocrites, but essentially the entire basis off of the modern, this modern environmentalism is essentially faked. The entire basis of all of this, which I'll get into, are basically on two separate things. One is the great villain, CO2. Carbon dioxide is the greatest villain. And then on the other hand, you've got, plastics, right? Which is a byproduct, whatever. But, most importantly, plastic straws. Because plastic straws, they're killing the turtles. And I want to get into all that in a little bit. Anyways, so we got a pretty big show today. Good show, I think. For this Earth Day, I want to go into all the points. I want to get into a few things to talk about. I want to give a quick shout out to Alex Epstein. Yes, I know, Epstein. I support the Epsteins, by the way, but Alex Epstein creating this website called Energy Talking Points. I suggest you check it out. If you have any questions on climate change, because, when you try and Google anything, when you try to search up anything, YouTube, Google, all these other places, Facebook, whatever, you will not find any information targeting or asking questions about the current policies that they create, right? You know, they'll say, hottest year on record, more fires, more hurricane, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? And it makes it extremely hard for you to actually try and do research. What's against the, 97% of scientists claim that, climate change is a real threat and we're all going to die, right? But it's very hard to find things against that. And then, what people will say, they'll go, well, it's because it's all, it's all real. So that's why there's all. No, it's because, Google's a massively leftist platform. It's extremely biased. And if you want to actually do any research, it becomes a lot harder. So I wanted to get into, a few things. I want to talk about the plastic. I want to talk about the whole plastic, microplastic thing. Talk a little bit about the whole basis of, and a little bit of the history of it, of climate alarmism and, CO2 being villainized. I want to talk a little bit. I want to get into some of the points he makes in Energy Talking Points. And I want to talk about a little bit more about EVs. So, a lot of people know that, and to a lot of people's dismay, is that you go around to any fast food chain, all your cups, all the straws will be paper now in Canada. You will not see plastic straws anymore. And why is that? Why are plastic straws the number one villain for this, this climate group? Well, it all started a few years ago when there's this one video that came out with a turtle, okay? This turtle had something in its nose, and the videographer looks at it and they go, oh my God, it's a plastic straw. First of all, there was no proof. There was no proof it was a plastic straw, okay? They did no research. They actually have no evidence that it was a plastic straw. They have no idea what it was, okay? It could have been, a piece of piping. It could have been a lot of things, right? But they took on this narrative where it's a plastic straw and thousands and thousands of turtles are getting killed. It's like Gaza for the turtles out here. That's what they're making it seem. When in reality, very little amount of turtles actually died. I think everyone, and I definitely was, under the impression that it was, thousands of turtles. The turtles are going extinct because we're murdering them with plastic straws. That's not really true. That was never true. Not only was that plastic straw theory completely unfounded, unbased, right? But that one video, which by definition is an extremely emotional video, right? It rallied people and allowed people to then, attack all these companies going, plastic straws are the problem. Hey, by the way, have you noticed that even though the straws are now paper, everything else is still plastic? You gotta think about it. The little pouch on the juice box that holds the new paper straws is made of plastic. So not only is this hypocritical anti-business policies that are like propagating around, it's this idea that plastic is the number one enemy because plastic, it's single use and, it pollutes a lot. Paper is so much better because it's biodegradable. Ignore the fact that, it's like 5 times more carbon intensive to make a paper straw than a plastic straw, right? Not only that, paper straws are one use. They're one-time use. Second, well, it's more like a quarter-time use because you're not even done your drink and the paper straw is disintegrating. They showed that with these single-use plastic straws, they can be reused 50 times, right? Before they're actually starting to, if you clean them, they're fine. But then they go, these paper straws are better. So let's just say, okay, that it was a plastic straw that was killing that turtle. Which the turtle didn't even die, just had a thing in its, whatever. Let's say, for the sake of example, right? For the sake of argument, let's say it was plastic straws that were the problem. Let's say plastic straws were massively detrimental to society. Paper straws would be the alternative, right? Oh, except here's the problem. The paper straws, in order to keep the lining on the inside from like collapsing, because it's paper, right? It's like cardboard. And what happens when cardboard gets wet? It disintegrates. So in order to slow down that disintegration process, you know what these companies do? Oh, they're just putting forever chemicals in it. So now there are these toxic forever chemicals that are inside these paper straws, which are more harmful to humans than the plastic straws. Not only that, they're also more carbon intensive than plastic straws. So this whole climate policy, it's all based off hypocrisy. It's targeting these very specific little things and then revolving everything around that, making these changes. And guess what? Guess who's profiting? Not you, because you're paying more. These paper straws are more expensive. They disintegrate. You can't reuse them. And they're toxic to your health. Not only because they're more expensive, prices go up. You want to talk about all of these things. This is another thing I want to get into, how all these new green things apparently are supposed to be cheaper. It's not true. They're just lying to you. So, you know, these paper straws that they're introducing everywhere, nobody likes them, but everyone kind of goes with it because they're like, well, you know, for the environment, right? Oh, let me just poison you a little bit. Let me put a little forever chemicals in you. Let you disintegrate it. And this isn't even like a conspiracy theory, right? Google it right now. Paper straws. First thing, you know, if you Google it, paper straws who have, you know, forever chemicals, first thing that pops up, you know, it's got these forever chemicals in it. They found it. It's not like it was this ragtag group. University studies have found that these things, they're toxic for you. They're not good for you, right? And that gets to my second point. I want to, you know, let's actually talk about this plastic pollution, because everyone goes, you know, the oceans, they're full of plastic. Yeah, it's bad. It's not great, right? But everyone going, well, you know, because we're banning the straws, we're going to help, you know, the seas. We'll help the oceans, right? That's not true. Again, it's all based off of nothing. Where do you think most plastic pollution in the ocean comes from? It comes from, you know, a couple rivers. There's one study that says it comes from 10 rivers account for 90% of all ocean plastic pollution, right? Another study says it's more like 1,000. Okay, so let's look at both of them. All of these rivers are in low to middle income urban centers, mostly in Asia, mostly in Africa. So you look at these rivers, the Nile, the Yangtze, the whatever. It's all these rivers in Niger, in Egypt, India, and all the Asian countries. So mostly China, but you also got Vietnam, Myanmar, all these places, right? These places account for massive amounts of this plastic pollution when it's not even North America. Because here's the thing, everyone's been sold on this myth of recycling, right? Because instead of, you know, tackling the real issue of reusability, people want to go, you know, I'm recycling, I'm doing my part, so it's okay. It's okay that I can pollute, right? And these leftists, they pollute as much. You know, they go get their Starbucks. What do you think they do with the cups? Oh, it's gone, right? They don't actually care. Nobody actually cares about this climate stuff, right? They just want to use it as a platform to gain more power, to gain more, you know, influence. But you look at it, right? Why is North America, why is Europe so passionate about hurting these businesses and hurting consumers by increasing these costs, when in reality, all the problems are coming from these poor countries that manufacture everything, that don't have any environmental regulations? And I'm not here to say to throw your trash out on the ground. That's not what I'm here to say. I'm saying that's what they do in China. That's what they do in India. They throw their garbage in the rivers and it gets up in the ocean. And yet somehow North America and Europe are to blame. Because it's always North America and Europe's fault. It's always the countries with quite low percentages of global emissions that seemingly the cause of all these issues. If these leftists actually cared about the environment, then wouldn't they be in favor of, sanctioning these countries, maybe posing higher tariffs on these countries, maybe stopping the trade from these countries? No, because there are all these leftist communists that love China. They all love China, and we love it. Why? Because we used to be able to send all the recycling that you thought was doing so well for the planet. I'm doing my part, right? No, that all gets shipped off to Asia. What did you think was going to happen? So we're also lied on we've been told this lie that recycling is the end-all be-all of this climate catastrophe, right? If you just recycle, you do your part, it'll be fine. You know how much stuff is actually recycled when you put it in the blue bin? 12%. That's total average. That doesn't take into account other things, like these, the wrappings on meat or these flexible plastics. 2% of those are recycled. Most of that ends up in landfills, ends up getting shipped. America used to ship all its plastic to China. All its recycling to China used to get sold, shipped to China. What does China do with it? Maybe they do a little bit of recycling, but then they realize, hey, it's not very economical to recycle all this stuff. So what do the Chinese do? Do a little bit of burning here, a lot of landfill there, chuck it in the ocean, chuck it in the rivers. That's what they do. At least here, you pop it in a landfill, it goes underground, or you burn it, disappears, doesn't go in the ocean, doesn't go in our water, breaks down to microplastic, and then affects the entire world. Climate policy in North America and Europe is so strict that it's hard for businesses to keep going, right? And they want to continue imposing these restrictions. And that's how the globalists get you, because these globalist organizations, they pressure the governments to increase, these regulations, which is anti-business, and it creates more control. Like in Canada now, they want to create a plastic registry, another way that the government's going to be able to encroach on these businesses. They'll start tracking how much plastic you make, how much you recycle, how much you reuse, under this guise, the environment. What happens when, I don't like what you're doing, your plastic quota is too high, we're going to shut you down. More control to the government doesn't work. More control to these governments, and especially these globalized governments, these globalized people who want to control everything. Giving these people more power should not be an option, should not be the solution. Canada is one of the cleanest countries in the world, and yet more and more of these regulations, because apparently we're not doing our part. Apparently we're, guess what pollutes more? A single family home, or like a homeless guy with his tent and puts all their stuff everywhere. They're going to they don't care where their garbage goes. They're going to litter all around them. And I'm not talking about, CO2, so-called pollution. I'm talking about real pollution that impacts your community, that impacts your cities. This is the type of pollution we should be caring about. If you want to say, right, I'm pro-climate, which I'm pro the climate. I don't want people throwing their garbage. I don't want people throwing their Tim Hortons cups on the floor, in the grass on my lawn. Nobody wants that. CO2 is not the issue. Littering is a massive issue, and we've been able to reduce that over time. And by the way, I just want to point out, carbon emissions from the G7 nations are down, by the way, as China, India, and Africa, they're massively raising. China's building like 3 coal plants every week. All right? So it's not, Canada, the UK, all these countries produce like 0.01% of global emissions, and they're on the downtrend. So it's not really our job. What we should be focusing on, yes, I think we need to get better recycling techniques. True. But to lie to everyone, virtue signal, go, I'm so much better because I recycle, right? You're a piece of shit because you don't care. As they throw their gum on the floor, as they throw, the cigarettes on the floor. It's this type of hypocrisy that plagues the entire community. And we have to look into that. Yes, new innovations need to come. There need to be a market for recycling plastics, right? Because the only reason plastics aren't recycled at higher levels is because it's not economical. The recycling that comes from, throwing it out in the bin comes from aluminum, comes from glass, comes a little bit from paper. But when you throw out, right, your yogurt container, which still has yogurt in it, they can't recycle it. So it depends on what you're looking at. If you're, if you have a more practical view on the environment, have a practical view. Care about your community. Don't care about what they're all doing. And if you do care about what the global emissions are doing, maybe start sanctioning China, India, Myanmar, all these countries that are massively polluting. But you know why they won't? Because everything's made over there. It's all made over there. So these people, again, these hypocrites, these leftist hypocrites, they'll go, too much pollution on their iPhone made in China. Think about it. You think these supply chains are all clean? You think the supply chain for Nike is clean? Be honest with yourself, Be honest with what your policies actually are. Because you can't support these two things at once. I'm here to tell you, I care about my community, I care about my country, and how the landscape looks. I'm not in favor of cutting down millions of acres, millions of trees to build wind farms, solar farms, like they've done in Ireland, where they've cut down 14 million trees to build these wind farms. Right? So it's all this hypocrisy. And then I want to get on to now, I think the biggest, the one that climate policy for the last 2 decades have essentially based everything off of. And it's this 1989 chart called the hockey stick chart. And what it shows is that, for the centuries leading up, 5 centuries, global temperatures have decreased. Late 1800s, massive uptick. All the way to 1990s, right? Massive uptick, looks like a hockey stick. This hockey stick chart has been the basis of the United Nations' entire climate policy action. Has been the basis of nearly every governmental, policy since then on this basis of climate change. They're going, global temperatures are increasing at the exact moments when humans started industrializing, so it must be CO2. There's a lot of things that contribute to global warming, right? First of all, let me tell you, climate change has been happening forever. The climate is always changing on Earth. Earth goes through hot periods and cold periods. That's a known fact. You can't argue otherwise. CO2 and global temperatures are essentially all-time lows. All of these climate, graphs that are showing massive increases in temperatures are on such a short time scale that it completely ignores millions and millions of years. Even if you ignore the millions, hundreds of thousands of years of CO2 and of global temperatures. If you base it in 100 years, which is such a short time span for Earth, because humans can only think in these short time spans, it makes it seem like everything's horrendous, right? Oh my God, 1.5 degrees in 100 years, ocean level's gonna rise by 10 meters. It's not true. Here's what happens. We're in a historic cold period, in fact. CO2 emissions are massively down. Millions of years ago, when the T-Rexes existed. CO2 was massively high, the Earth was very warm, so plants were able to get big. All these people who want to talk about, CO2 being the bad guy, ignore that, CO2 is good for plants, right? Earth is more green now than it was 50 years ago. Because of higher levels of CO2, crops are more productive. Humans are able to conduct more agriculture. Trees grow more. plants grow more, and overall, it's a greener planet. Another, you keep going on this, right? The fact that the sun has been getting hotter has been greatly dismissed by all these climate scientists, these scientists, right? Maybe the sun isn't getting hotter, but sun activity, it moves. I don't know if you know this, but the sun, creates a lot of heat. The sun is the main factor of how heat works on Earth, right? And it's largely ignored. However, you have to look at, this could be the weakest link in terms of advocating for a non-human related climate thing. That's what they'll all say. Here's the fact, right? Humans do have an impact on the atmosphere, 100%. Do we know how much of an impact? No. It is we have an impact. True. Do we know the extent of that impact? Is it 50%, 30%, 100% of all the CO2? We don't know. We don't know this. And anyone who tells you do know exactly is wrong. But, all the climate policies were based off of this one chart. Here's the problem with that one chart. It's wrong. They were taken to court. It was proven it was wrong. What was wrong with this chart? Well, how these charts work is that, the researcher takes thousands of different samples, right? Ice core samples, tree core samples, temperature, thermostat temperatures from around the world. And they put them all together, they take an average, and then you find a chart for the global temperatures. That is kind of what he did. The scientist who did this, what he did, was he found all the points that helped his argument, that, the hockey stick argument, and he made them have a much greater weighing in the statistical average. So what does that mean? Well, let's take an example. And this is the example that was proven. There are two pieces of data. One is from Colorado. I think it was ice core, tree core samples. And one was from California. Same thing. Likely tree core samples. Tree ring samples, whatever. The one in California shows this decline and then uptick, right? The one in Colorado shows basically flat. That's what it showed. So what happened? Ideally, both of these pieces of data would have been put into the chart at roughly the same levels, right? No. Statistically, the California result was weighted 380 times more than the Colorado result. And essentially what was proved was that you could have put almost any piece of data within that chart, within that amalgamation of statistics, and it would have still shown an increase caused by global, human industrialization. Not only that, the entire chart ignores two large periods of human civilizations: the medieval warm period and the Little Ice Age. So these were times in which global temperatures were very warm for a couple hundred years during the medieval era. And then temperatures saw a massive drop during the Little Ice Age. Over the warm period in this chart does not exist. In this one graph, the chart does not show a medieval warm period. In fact, what it shows is for like 600 years, it's been a mini ice age where temperatures steadily decline and then uptick. What's the reality of the situation? Global temperatures were warmer during the medieval warm period by roughly 0.5 degree, 1 degree, than what is now considered the highest point of global temperatures. So, what does this mean? Not only do the climate people look at the climate in a very short period of time and does not take into account the hundreds, the thousands of years of context that are necessary to formulate a cohesive argument, they also base their entire philosophy off of a chart that has statistically been proven, to be statistically inaccurate. It is a misrepresentation of the data. And ever since it came out in 1998, the United Nations, all these places have based every single thing on it. So that's the reality of the situation. You cannot look at all these things through this single lens. They will never show you a chart that goes back thousands of years. Why? Because they know that the climate fluctuates. And that doesn't fit the argument. The argument doesn't fit that. Now, why is this so important? Well, going forward, all of these climate catastrophe things you see, all this climate alarmism, is based off models, right? They take models of what's been going on and they predict in the future what's going to happen. And with these models, they're able to scare you and say that the climate's going to increase 5 degrees, sea levels will rise, the ice, polar bears will die, the ice, it's all going to melt. That's what they say. Here's the reality of the situation. These climate models not only take the extreme high end of all these data sets, they take a very, exaggerated and likely unrealistic points to base off these models. So they say, well, carbon emissions will massively increase, which will cause these massive increase in all these things. So that's one. Two, let's say they even take a more conservative approach in terms of their models. It doesn't make up for the fact that you can't predict the future. You cannot predict the future of the climate. And in fact, these models are built in with so much error. There's so much error in these future cast models that the expected increase in global temperatures is negated by the fact that the error rate is bigger than the increase itself. So let's say they say it'll increase by 2 degrees. The error on that 2 degree increase is like 3 degrees. So you can't even tell if it's actually going up. They're just assuming it is, and they're telling you it is to make a point. It's all based off of essentially lies. It's all based off these predictive models that they have no idea what's actually going to happen. And this is what they want. They want you to be so scared. They want you to be so shook by these data that you blame everyone. You blame, and mostly you blame yourself. They were able to get you to blame yourself too, right? So what can happen is these organizations, these governments, are able to expand their reach. They reach more and more. Until one day, here's what's going to happen. Here's what they want. It'll be a Chinese-style social credit score, but it'll be based off of your carbon footprint. They call it the carbon footprint score, Oh, you walked today? Good job. Ooh, you bought something, right? You didn't buy it. Whatever it is, it'll become another way to control people, and then they'll penalize you. You go, oh, I don't like that. The government will say, I don't like that. I don't like you. Boom, you're saying things that are anti-government. Oh, your carbon score is too high. And then what will happen? Oh, you can't apply for loans if your carbon score is too low. You can't apply for jobs because your carbon score is too low. It's all things to control you and to give the governments more control. And then they'll say it's a conspiracy theory. Just you wait. They'll introduce it. They've introduced a plastic registry. That's what they want to do. You know what else they want to do? This just came out. The NDP just proposed a bill C-178, I believe. C-178. And this is, or 138, whatever it is. You can just Google it after. This is essentially a banning of free speech. They go, if you say anything positive about fossil fuels, say anything positive about, the economic impacts of fossil fuels, you go, drilling oil is good for indigenous communities. You can't. First of all, that's not even allowed. And companies are no longer able to say that, oil companies can no longer say that, well, look, we're creating jobs, we're helping the economy. No, you can't say these things anymore. Why? Guess what happens if you say these things? Guess what happens if you say natural gas has been a net positive for Canadian society, the Canadian economy? Hundreds of thousands of jobs, billions of dollars in economic growth, right? Guess what happens when you say these things in this proposed bill? Up to 2 years in prison or a $500,000 fines if you speak positively about the impacts of fossil fuels. It's this encroachment. They're coming for you and nobody cares. Nobody's looking at them. Nobody knows about these rules. And you know what they'll say? They'll say it's to stop misinformation, right? The government doesn't actually care about misinformation. It cares about information against the government. The NDP's platform, ultra left-wing platform, along with the Liberals, along with the Green Party, all their platforms are based off of this, we got to sacrifice a little bit now so we can protect our kids in the future. We have to maybe pay a little bit extra in carbon taxes so that people in the future can flourish, right? So that Canada doesn't just get destroyed, right? So now they're going to try and crack down on your free speech. Not only is free speech already disappearing with these hate speech laws, but more and more laws like this will start to come out. First, you can't say anything good about fossil fuels. Oh, if you say anything about climate change, 3 years in prison, right? So it's going to keep expanding. And if you let them keep expanding, they will. If you don't push back, the government will keep expanding. Then you look at it, right? Let's talk about some of these climate change points, all right? By the way, telling a poor country that they're not allowed to industrialize through fossil fuels is anti-human. These people don't actually care. In fact, they would love it if the poor would disappear. Because here's the reality of the situation. Clean energy, especially solar and wind, are unreliable, they're more expensive, and require massive amounts of infrastructure while taking many more materials than what traditional gas-powered plants take. So going to Africa and going, no, you can't use your oil wealth, you can't use your oil resources to develop extremely quickly like every other modern country has done. You have to use solar, you have to use wind. This is anti-human. While letting China off the hook for all of this, well, we have to hurt Canadians by not exporting our energy, by letting, dictators in Saudi Arabia and Iran sell their oil on the global stage, but Canada's being limited by these anti-Canadian policies. Let's get into some of these energy talking points from Alex Epstein. But check out his website. It's phenomenal. I need to get his book. But let's talk about it. So they go, the climate's going to warm, right? First of all, when the climate warms, it doesn't warm at the equator. It doesn't warm equally everywhere. It warms in cold places. So in the northern and southern hemispheres, it's going to get warmer, which is good because most of Canada is inhabitable because it's under 8 layers of ice. This is good. But even if you say it's not good, whatever, right? You go, more climate change, it'll cause more heat deaths, right? More people are going to die from heat because it's so hot outside, right? More people, this is from the Lancet Journal, more people die from cold than heat. Point that out there. By a massive margin, it's nearly 20-1. Millions of people die from cold than heat. And if, in fact, when you actually look at the numbers, as climate, has warmed up, human-made or not, doesn't matter. As the temperatures have increased, guess what happened? Less people are dying from cold. 287,000 people less have now died from cold over the last decade due to increasing temperatures. What's that number for heat? Well, 116,000 people have died because of heat. So what does that mean? Global warming has been a net positive impact on people dying. That makes it, 100,000 people were saved because of higher temperatures caused by fossil fuels. So this is what they don't want to tell you. It gets warmer in cold places, right? And what happens when you have more money? The country can invest more in infrastructure. You can invest more in infrastructure. When when your country starts to develop because of fossil fuels, you're then able to use that money to get air conditioning, to get heating, right? It's not, all these places in Africa, all these places in Asia that are dying because of cold. I don't think they'll say no to higher temperatures. I don't think they'll go, no more higher temperatures, right? I don't think that's what's going to happen. But let's keep going. Climate deaths, right? Deaths from climate change over the last century, you think they're up or down? They're down. 98% they're down. As we've been able to develop, as people have gotten richer, as countries have gotten more used to using the strong, energy grid, fossil fuels to build out new infrastructure, to build out these cement buildings, these concrete walls, all these things, right? We've been able to master climate-related events. So when storms come around, we're better prepared. And then people will go, and let's just add one more thing to it. Let's just add a little extra tidbit to that. Hurricanes, this comes straight out of the UN, by the way. Hurricane frequency expected over the next decade or century or whatever. Hurricane frequency, listen to me, from the UN, is expected to go down. And then you'll go, but then this is what they'll go. They'll be stronger though. Yeah, they'll be stronger. Again, from the UN. You know how much stronger? At 2 degrees Celsius above, baseline temperatures? Between 1 to 10%. I don't know if we'll manage. I don't know if we'll be able to manage. Are you fucking kidding me? I don't know if we'll be able to manage all that. And then people, here's what they love to use. Here's what the leftists love to use. They love to go, well, look at how much damage it's creating. Billions and billions of dollars in damage because of these climate things, right? Yeah, maybe there's more damage because in 1900, there were 10 people in Miami. So when a storm hit, a hurricane hit, 3 buildings were brought down. Nowadays, there's millions of people living on the coast. So massive buildings, massive expensive houses. So when these storms hit, of course it's going to cause more damage. That's not the right number you should be looking at. You should be looking at damage as a percentage of GDP, which has gone down again. It's gone down over the last century. Why? Because we've been able to master these things better. Storms don't impact a concrete house as well as it impacts a wooden house. Fossil fuels have allowed us to master the climate. 100 million people now live below the sea level. Was that possible before? Netherlands, the entirety of the Netherlands is underwater. But you know why they've been able to stay alive? Because we've been able to master the climate, right? And here's another thing they like to talk about a little bit. They like to go, solar and wind, it's so much cheaper, it's so much better, right? They like to go, it's so much better, it's so much cheaper than fossil fuels, so we should just use it, right? First of all, let me tell you something. If solar and wind were truly better than fossil fuels would be phased out within 5 years. If the government has to force you to phase out a thing, maybe the other thing isn't better, right? Because it's all business. No electricity company would rather create a cheap energy, an expensive energy, fossil fuels, than a cheap one like solar. The build out of solar and wind would be so massive that all their all these things, these billions of dollars of subsidies would not even need to exist. So, they talk about how it's getting cheaper, right? The solar panels are getting cheaper. They've been getting cheaper for the past, 3 decades. You know why solar panels are getting cheaper? First of all, it's all made in China, by the way. Massive state subsidies, massive amounts of slave labor. Every Uyghur Muslim in China are building solar panels or they're building electric cars. That's what they're doing. They're all slaves. It's all based off slave labor. China has a near monopoly on these rare earth minerals that are needed for these photovoltaic cells, as well as for the wind farm production. China has been artificially decreasing these costs. Yes, there has been some ramp up in manufacturing. Of course, that's going to bring down costs to the level that they're expecting. These people, right? They're going, now it's kind of like at parity, which it's not, right? Even let's say it is. They're predicting, well, in the next 10 years, it'll decrease even more. I don't think that's true anymore. There's only a certain level of subsidies you can keep going, right? At some point, market fundamentals will take over. And guess what? When you have the government's pushing billions and billions of dollars in subsidies in an industry that does not have a supply chain properly built out, it creates artificial demand. And what does that mean? There's not enough mines to create all the minerals. There's not enough manufacturing for all the minerals. So guess what? And by the way, these solar cells that are made in China, they're making so many of them that the government essentially has to bail out all these businesses. It's all propped up by the Chinese government. None of this is natural. It's artificially decreasing these costs, right? So yeah, what happens, right? Well, now you see it. Lithium prices are up, copper prices are up. All the minerals that are needed for these things, they're increasing massively, right? The price for, I believe, molybdenum, whatever it's called, critical component in wind farms, has gone up like 100% over the last few years. At some point, the demand, because before it was fine, because there wasn't that much demand. It was a small market, right? 100% increase in a market that has like 1 million cells is not that much compared to 50 million cells, right? Not only that, but wind and solar, they're not all the time, The sun goes away, right? You cannot use these in random urban centers. Like, it doesn't work in Canada, because in the winter it'll be blocked, mostly. At night it gets blocked, right? And the times you need it the most, it's not going to work. And guess who ends up picking the slack? It's natural gas anyways. Natural gas picks up the slack anyways for all these solar farms. And if it was so much cheaper, right, why is it that California and Germany, 2 places which have the largest share of renewable energies, solar and wind, Germany, I believe 35% of their energy comes from solar and wind, California 25%, why do they have significantly higher energy prices than places all around them? For some reason, solar and wind are the only 2 options you could possibly have, right? They don't care about nuclear. Nuclear is by far the best option to fix the climate. If you actually cared about CO2 emissions, it'd be nuclear energy. And especially Canadians. Why? Because we can mine uranium here. We can process uranium here. We could build these, and that's what you're seeing in all the prairies, right? They're the ones who are adopting nuclear energy faster than the rest of it. While the rest of Canada is shutting down their nuclear plants, the rest of Europe, especially Germany, shut down on their nuclear plants. What did you think happens? Germany is now more reliant on gas imports than ever. and their prices are up. So you got to think about it sometimes. You got to think about it. And they always talk about this levelized cost of energy. That's the metric they use for solar and wind. That's how they're able to say it's cheaper or as expensive as fossil fuels, right? Levelized cost of energy, by definition, does not take into account reliability, does not take into account at what points is it operating, right? And then they go, well, you know, we could just build massive solar farms in the desert. Yeah. 1 million square kilometers of solar, and the battery build out will be the biggest battery build out in history. It'll be the biggest infrastructure project ever. Trillions of dollars would be needed to build out this infrastructure. Who's going to pay for that? Oh, you are the taxpayer. You are. You know, you want to talk about saving the planet for your kids? How about saving the country for your kids? How about saving the country so that maybe they're not at 200% debt to GDP, so that maybe they can operate and not be taxed at 85%. Maybe think about that, climate people. Maybe take into account that nuclear is a great power. You know, more people die from installing solar panels than have died from all the nuclear reactor meltdowns in history, right? Not only that, but all these nuclear reactors were built off of old technology. New technology has advanced so well that now we can use modular nuclear centers that don't melt down. New technology will allow us to move forward. You know, you look at all these old tech, it was all, not only was it human error, but it was old technology. This technology is nearly 100 years old now. You know, it's 50 years old. Think about how much innovation happens in 50 years, right? These climate people, they don't want to look at the actual issues. They just want to push us one narrative that's super easy, it's super clean. Nuclear is too, you know, France has been running on mostly nuclear forever now. And it's been working great. It's been working great. Canada can do nuclear. You know why Canada should do nuclear? We have the uranium. We can mine the uranium, process it here, and then we can use it to generate our electricity and then export it. It's a clean, renewable, you know, source of, and reliable source of energy. It's extremely power dense. Sure, you could have your wind, you could have your solar, but it needs to be backed up by something because those things are very unreliable. They're very intermittent. You know what'll be stable? You know what'll keep producing? Nuclear. Nuclear would be the best option to replace oil, coal plants, especially natural gas, whatever. Right? When you look at all these countries and you see that all their emissions declines have been from switching over from oil to natural gas, and you look forward, you know what's going to propel us forward? It's going to be innovation, right? You saw it with the oil industry. You saw how they switched to shale, started fracking, right? Natural gas, 30% cleaner than oil. See, all these things, the one thing that'll push us forward is innovation. It'll be capitalism that pushes us forward. It's not governmental policies that are used to encroach on free rights. It's not massive governmental spending. It's not that. That's the reality of the situation. That's just a small, you know, this whole thing that I've spoken about, I've spoken nearly an hour. This whole thing is based off of this idea where the governments know better than you. They know better than you. Don't talk to your community members. Don't talk to your, right? No. You shouldn't walk to your local business. You shouldn't take the bus. You shouldn't take the metro. 15-minute cities where everyone in the community knows each other, where they can walk everywhere, where it's walkable friendly, you know, it's pedestrian friendly, bike friendly. You know, that type of stuff, it's not great, you know. Electric cars is what we need. Don't mind that the cobalt is mined by slaves in the Congo. Don't mind that there's more slaves now because of these green industries than have ever existed. You know, the DRC has 400,000 slaves. Almost all cobalt mining, which comes from the DRC, is made with slave labor, child slave labor. That's a fact. That's a fact. Right? And you look at China, they're subsidizing, they're using more slave labor. Your entire basis of this green agenda is based off of slave labor and exploitation. You want to talk about, colonizers, talk about the green colonizers, talk about how the United Nations is pushing policies which are actively hurting people, keeping people in poverty, killing people because of the cold, and finally, keeping them in exploitive slaves, state. Anyways, there's so much more to talk about in this subject, but yeah, I think it's been a good episode. It's been a great episode. So, happy Earth Day to all the NDPers out there who want to arrest you for talking about fossil fuels. Shout out to those turtles that never died from the fake plastic stuff, and shout out to China and India for being the biggest polluters on the planet. Anyways, that's all I gotta say. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time.